Before this episode begins, let me just say, I am a Jazz fan, but one of my secondary teams is the Thunder, and I gotta be honest, I have never been so pissed off about a Thunder win, probably in my entire life. Yeah, the Thunder won the game, but the Nuggets have been getting so many freebies so many fucking times. Like, they got 36 free throws attempted. Thunder had, 26? Down the stretch, the Nuggets weren't making them, and the refs kept giving them to them, expected them to do something, but they didn't. And down the stretch in the fourth quarter, some of those fouls weren't even fouls. It was just excuses to give the Nuggets a win when they just literally can't make anything. Let me tell you, if the Nuggets didn't get so many free throws, this would have been a blowout. Of course, Nuggets should have gotten smashed, but of course, the referees in the NBA have to save Jokic, apparently. Anyway, I'm done ranting about them. Also, Cleveland, you're done. You're down 3-1. You just got embarrassed on the road against Indiana. Yeah, this series is pretty much over at this point. Can't overcome injuries. Unfortunately for them, injuries are a part of the game, so I can't really hold anything against them. But as a 1 seed, this was a bit disappointment. That's all I got for basketball. On to the football stuff. Welcome back to Grizzly Talks Football. We are continuing our conference season reviews and predictions for the upcoming season. We got Mountain West today. Kicking off the group of 5. Very nice. This is for everybody. It was pretty much nobody, but everybody who might say, are you going to do group of 5? Yes, I am, and we're starting today. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, make sure you check the link in the description with the entire playlist so that you'll have every single episode for this season up there. And you'll also have it for future episodes whenever I do end up recording them. Also, don't forget, you hit the red subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. And it also helps a lot. Without further delay, let's get to the Mountain West 2024 season reviews. If for some reason you haven't been following and don't know exactly how this works, I'll tell you. You got all 5 of these categories here for every single conference. You got the teams that were elite, teams that were above average, teams that were decent, teams that were disappointing, and teams that were ass. Sound good? Awesome. We're kicking this off with the Air Force Falcon. Very disappointing in my opinion. Obviously went 5-7. They actually went 1-7 before they won their last 4 games, which is very interesting. This team got beat by New Mexico of all teams. What the fuck? You guys remember 2023 when Air Force was 8-0 at one point and then they lost to Army, ending any hopes of being a group of 5 powerhouse and potentially being a New Year's 6 bowl game? That was pretty cool for a while. I think the down here was definitely evident and very inevitable in the case of Air Force. Now, don't get me wrong, Air Force has had some success, including 1985 when they got as high as 4th or 5th in the country. They got in the top 5, but then they lost to yours truly. But this season, man, they just were not competitive at all. They got dominated by Navy and Army at the same year. Ouch. For a run-first offense, rather an option offense, it was pretty bad. I get they had 200 yards per game as a team, but nobody really stood out, especially offensively. I guess the only person really worth mentioning is Dylan Carson, who had 600 yards and 5 touchdowns, but that's about it. And to no surprise, nobody got drafted for this team. I think this is supposed to be a very much easier schedule for Air Force in the upcoming season, but I guess we'll see how it goes. And next we got the Boise State Broncos. Cue it.
Elite!
The Ashagenti show at its finest. They got 12-2 Mountain West title, made the college football playoff, and lost in the Fiesta Bowl, sadly, to Penn State. But honestly, Boise State should be proud of themselves for the season that they had because holy hell, that was a crazy one. But let me tell you, their only loss on the season, on the regular season, should I say, was against Oregon by only 3 points at Hudson Stadium. That was an impressive loss, even though they lost the game. They did have some close calls against teams that I guess you could expect. UNLV, Nevada, Wyoming was a very shocking one, but oh yeah, and also Georgia Southern by 11. What? But this team won all the games they needed to, and they ended up going into the top 10. And they actually finished the season 8th in the AP poll in the final one. Max Madison was pretty good. 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns to 6 picks. Not terrible. But the real man running the show had to be Ashagenti, right? 7 yards a carry, 2,600 yards, 29 touchdowns on the ground. Jesus Christ. And also another guy worth mentioning is Cameron Camper with 900 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. He was the receiving leader. And of course, 2 players were drafted from this team, including a top 10 pick, their highest drafted player in history, Eshagenti, 6th overall to the Raiders. Oh yeah, and there was also a guy, I think he was drafted in like the 6th round, Ahmed Hassanein, edge defender for Boise State, going to the Lions. He was also drafted. Such an incredible year for Boise State. I felt like if any team was going to make a playoff as a group of 5 team, it would definitely be Boise State. And they proved that just this season. Next we got Colorado State Rams. Decent. Went 8-5. They unfortunately lost their bowl game. They were actually 2nd in the Mountain West. Well, based on conference record and all that, because UNLV lost the conference championship. I'll get to them in a moment. But they actually did win 6 of their last 7 games, which was an interesting turnaround. But, hey, better late than never, I guess. Just a shame they got dominated by Miami of Ohio in the Arizona Bowl, which sucks. Got blanked by Texas, unfortunately lost badly to Colorado, then lost the double overtime to Oregon State, and then lost to Fresno State. What the hell? That was in Game 11, by the way. But this is a pretty good season for Colorado State, and you also got a player drafted as well. I hope I say this quarterback's name right. Braden Fowler Nicolosi got 2,800 yards, 14 touchdowns, 9 picks. Not horrible, I guess. Avery Morrow, Red Russian, with just over 1,000 yards with 9 touchdowns. And on the receiving end, it was actually Caleb Goody with 21 catches for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, leading the receiving core. That's interesting. And of course, Torrey Horton was actually the only one drafted out of this class, and he may have won in the 5th round, I'm not sure. But he was selected by the Seahawks. Pretty decent year. Torrey Horton was actually a pretty interesting one in my opinion, so hope he does well in the NFL. Pretty decent year for Colorado State. Definitely not their best one. I would have to argue that 2000 season, maybe 2001 was their best one. I'm next to get the Fresno State Bulldogs. One of my Mario Kart team's members actually has a favorite team at Fresno State, which is really cool. But I gotta be fair to him. It may be on the low end, but they were still decent. They actually made a bowl game this season. 6-7, lost to North Illinois, double overtime in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. Only lost by 20 to Michigan, then won 3 straight, then lost to UNLV badly, Washington State, Hawaii by 1, Air Force, and then lost to UCLA. It's such a weird year because they did in fact beat Colorado State, which is a pretty nice win, but other than that, oof, a little rough. Mikey King had an okay season, 2,900 yards, 18 touchdowns, 11 picks. Rushing game wasn't very effective except for Elijah Gilling getting 8 rushing touchdowns. And on the receiving end, Matt Delana, who was undrafted free agent, signed to the Chiefs, just over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Nobody got drafted, but like I just said, Delana went to the Kansas City Chiefs as an undrafted free agent. A pretty decent year, more disappointing to be fair, but in terms of Fresno State standards, should I say, but I will say not too bad. And then you got the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. Disappointing. 5-7. Pretty disappointing to be fair. Didn't really get a hot streak going. It was just pretty up and down to be fair. Lost to Boise State, nearly beat UNLV by 2 points at home. Fortunately, they lost the game. Fresno State was literally like the only team that Hawaii beat that made a bowl game, which is interesting. As far as offensive stats go, I get Braden Shager didn't really have a bad season. 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 13 picks. And then on the receiving end, 2 players had over 600 yards. Nick Sinakel and Pofele Ashlock, both with 6 touchdowns. And of course, nobody got drafted from Hawaii. Let me tell you, you're going to see a lot of that in these group of 5 teams. Unless you got the Nevada Wolfpack. Ass! In a 13-game season, they legitimately were ass. As of late, they've just been not a good team. I think the best season came in like 2010. I think they were like 11-1. They beat Boise State, knocked them out of the national championship race with Colin Kaepernick of all people. Sadly for them, didn't beat anybody who made a bowl game. They went 3-10. They beat Oregon State and an FCS school, and along with Troy, who won the Sun Belt the year before. Nearly beat SMU, but they had a lot of close calls this season. They definitely could have made a bowl game if things went their way, but unfortunately for them, they didn't. That includes a close loss at Boise State. Crazy stuff. Brandon Lewis was okay. He had 2,300 yards, 16 touchdowns, 7 picks. Brandon Lewis, 8 rushing touchdowns. Savion Red had 8 touchdowns. On the receiving end, you got James Smith and Cortez Braun Jr. who had over 700 yards each. But the only guy drafted from Nevada was actually Keaton Crawford, safety, going to the Cardinals in like the 7th round. I gotta say, that was like the last thing I was expecting Nevada to have, a draft pick, even though they had a 3-win season. Speaking of ass, we got San Diego State Aztecs next. Ass! They fell a long way from reaching the Mountain West Championship game back in 2021. San Diego State also lives in my nightmares because they had a guy come out of there by the name of Marshall Faulk who tore up the NFL, which is crazy stuff. Number 2 pick, by the way, back in 1994. That was when Mel Kiper had his famous rant on the Colts, and then Bill Tobin had to step in. You gotta love good old live television, right? Unfortunately for San Diego State's case, didn't beat a team that made a bowl game, sadly. They actually lost to New Mexico, lost to Air Force as well. Got dominated by UNLV, got dominated by Boise State. Man, just a rough season for San Diego State fans. In that 3-9 season, Danny O'Neal was, mid. 2,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Sport below average, to be fair. But Marquez Cooper, 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. Why wasn't he given the ball more? Interesting. And to no one's surprise, nobody got drafted. Moving on, we got the San Jose State Spartans. I think they're the Spartans. But anyways, well, they were just decent. 7-6. The year before, they actually got robbed of the Mountain West Championship game because of some bullshit tiebreakers that were not announced to anybody, but apparently it was according to computers, which sucks. So here was the thing. San Jose State beat UNLV, but since they had a tied conference record, computers decided who goes to the Mountain West Championship to play Boise State, and it ended up being UNLV, which sucks. They did play both Boise State and UNLV in the same season just this season, and you can imagine how that went. They did finish the year 7-6 though, unfortunately lost in 5 overtimes through South Florida in the Hawaii Bowl, which is crazy. Sadly didn't beat anybody that made a bowl game, which is really surprising. If you didn't know, San Jose State had 2 quarterbacks with over 1,000 passing yards. Emmett Brown looked like he was the better one of the bunch. 1,600 yards, 16 touchdowns to 5 picks, with Walker Eget having 2,500 yards, 13 touchdowns to 10 picks. So they combined for over 4,000 yards and 29 touchdowns to 15 picks, which is honestly quite rare and interesting. And of course, a big part of that was Mr. Nick Nash, who was signed as an undrafted free agent to the Falcons. 104 receptions, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns. Was the Triple Crown winner this past season as far as receiving. Obviously, nobody got drafted, but like I said before, Nash went to the Falcons as an undrafted free agent. I'm excited to see what he does in the NFL. I'm very sure he's probably going to get a roster spot alongside corner Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. Good luck to him. Representing San Jose State in the NFL would be huge for him. And next we got the UNLV Rebels. Absolutely above average. I'm taking a victory lap on that one. 11-3, finished the season ranked in the final AP poll, and nearly won the Mountain West Championship. Actually lost that title game to Boise State for the right to go to the playoff. They went 11-3 with a bowl win in the LA Bowl against Cal. Only losses on the season for UNLV were against Syracuse in overtime and 2 losses to Boise State. They were both close games. There was also that thing with a quarterback that was promised some money to go to UNLV and play for them, but he ended up holding out because they lied to him. This is the problem about NIL. Like, some schools just don't have that money, and yet they fire up an astronomical amount of money to go the other player's way, and they ended up getting suckered in. Anyways, Hodgman Williams had almost 2,000 passing yards, 19 touchdowns to 5 picks, which is pretty nice. But the rushing game was deadly. You had 3 players have over 600 yards with 5+ touchdowns. And then there was the drafted player Ricky White with 79 catches, just over 1,000 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Speaking of Ricky White, he was drafted to the Seattle Seahawks in the 7th round. A very nice season for UNLV. Maybe they can go bigger and better than ever? I don't know. And next we got the New Mexico Lobos. The fact that these guys won 5 games when they were supposed to lose like quite more than that is crazy. I'll put them in decent because they did have a ranked win against Washington State. Remember when New Mexico started 0-4? Everyone was expecting them to go like 1-11 or 0-12. Yeah, that aged beautifully. And there was also a time in their first game of the season where they were actually favored to lose to Montana State by double digits. Obviously, they lost by 4, but you get the idea. This New Mexico team was expected to be ass. But I don't know what the fuck happened, but they ended up going 5-6 up until they shit the bed against Hawaii. Let me tell you, they almost made a bowl game this year, which is nuts. Fortunately, next season, they are playing Michigan, which is not going to be a good look. That's going to be a bloodbath. But I do have a question. How the fuck did this team, with Devin Dampier, who actually transferred, I can't remember where he transferred to. Was it somewhere in the ACC? I can't freaking remember. Oh, he said fucking Utah! He ended up having 2,800 yards, 12 touchdowns through 12 picks. But the rushing game? Yeah, damn. With combining Devin Dampier to Eli Sanders and combining their stats, they had over 2,000 yards and 28 rushing touchdowns. God. This man Dampier had 12 passing touchdowns and 19 rushing. That guy was kind of like a Jordan Lynch kind of thrower. 2 players with over 700 yards, that would be Ryan Davis and Luke Weissong. Unsurprisingly, nobody got drafted from New Mexico. Up next we got little brother Utah State. Disappointing. They actually went 4-8. Unfortunately, did not beat a team that made a bowl game. They could have beaten Colorado State if they would have just not shit the bed, but they did. Lost to New Mexico of all teams. Then got beat bad by Boise State, UNLV, Utah, and USC. Man, this schedule was actually pretty difficult. If they didn't schedule 3 ranked teams in the same schedule, one was inevitable, but they could have scheduled anybody else other than 2 ranked opponents out of conference. Anyways, if they would have done that, they would have made a bowl game, but they did not. Spencer Petras was actually the guy leading the charge. 2,300 yards, 17 touchdowns, 11 picks. But you can't forget about Bryson Barnes. This guy transferred from Utah to Utah State. What? Anyways, he had 850 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6 picks. He probably played less games in that one. Rasul Faison actually had 1,100 yards on almost 200 carries with 8 touchdowns, which is really nice. But I gotta tell you about Jalen Royals. 55 catches, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. Oh yeah, and also Otto Tia had 7 receiving touchdowns as well. I talked about Jalen Royals because Kansas City selected him in the 4th round with the 133rd pick, and I might add, he might be a steal, along with Cam Scatterboo going to the Giants. This is a guy who would go after the ball numerous amounts of times, and I hope he does well. That was basically the only highlight for Utah State's season. And the final team we got is the Wyoming Cowboys. Ass! I gotta be honest with you, I don't remember a single time that Wyoming was actually good ever since Josh Allen left that team. 3-9 with their biggest highlight, beating Washington State in Pullman? Wazoo. Did you seriously? Yeah, okay. Could have beaten Boise State at home if they didn't choke. Had a close game against Utah State as well, and San Diego State. And I know, unfortunately, they lost all 3 of those. I can't believe that last season, 2023, Wyoming was actually playing very close to Texas for 3 quarters, and then Texas turned on the Jets and never looked back. That could have been one of the upsets of the millennium if Wyoming would have pulled that off. But let's be honest, they're still ass. Quarterbacks are pretty abysmal, combining for 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 11 picks. Disastrous. Unsurprisingly, nobody got drafted here. And I know they're not on here, but I'm going to do the Pac-2 as well, since, there's only 2 teams in there. Might as well, right? I guess Oregon State with a 5-7 record, beating Washington State in the Pac-2 game that won the Pac-2 title. I guess I'll put them at decent. The only conference champion ever to have a losing record, which is quite insane. But that's just how Oregon State season went. Obviously, nobody got drafted from there. And as for Washington State, I would have put them in decent as well. With an 8-5 record, They started off 8-1. They lost their last 3 games. Why? And guess what? They were all close, except for the Boise State game. And I guess include the Holiday Bowl as well against Syracuse. Only notable player here was Kyle Williams, since he was drafted with 70 catches, 1,200 yards, and 14 touchdowns to the New England Patriots in the 3rd round. He was like the only guy that was drafted. I might as well do the Pac-12's season predictions now, since, well, they're not here, but come on. Starting off with Washington State, for some reason these two teams play twice this upcoming season, which is a very rare thing to see. But this has happened before. Don't get me wrong. It has. And I know, it's very weird, but I guess they split the series, hopefully. I think Washington State can go like 7-5, 8-4 perhaps. Unfortunately got a bad draw with Big Ten, Washington, SEC, Ole Miss, but every other game looks very winnable. And I think maybe 9-3 would be doable as well. Let's be honest, Washington State has really proved themselves to be like one of the more underrated and actually above average Pac-12 teams in the entire conference's history. And I think all that started in like 2017 when they got as high as 8th in the country before they got absolutely gum-spent by Cal. And from there until present day, they've actually shown they can really be above average. And as for Oregon State, if they somehow don't make a bowl game, I feel like they were just very disappointing because I expected to go 7-5 at least. Got an unfortunate draw of Texas Tech and Oregon out of conference, which really sucks for them. And I guess Houston as well? But those are literally the toughest games they have besides Washington State. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention the Apple Cup is like a rivalry. I'm not sure how long that's going to last, but pretty good scenes there for early season for Washington State. I'd rather them play them in the end of the season, but that's just me. Other than the games that I just mentioned between Texas Tech and Oregon, every other game looks winnable. If Oregon State somehow doesn't win, make it to the bowl game, that would be sad. That's all for the Pac-2. Now let's get to the 2025 predictions for the Belt West. And here we are, you see the categories, let's kick it off with Air Force. I'll be honest, the 5-7 season was not ideal for Air Force, but they got hot when it mattered most back at the end of the season. But honestly, I would see them being 7-5 this upcoming season. They actually did get quite lucky here, avoiding Boise State, but they do have to travel to Las Vegas to play UNLV. They ended up getting UConn, who actually had a 9-win season, which is interesting. But this is not a bad team at all. They should be better. Up next, we got the Boise State Broncos. Easily contenders. I mean, come on. Like, what are we doing here? Only team that I would see them potentially losing to is UNLV, but this is a much easier schedule than the last one. I wouldn't be surprised if they went 12-0 this season. But I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant. I'm going to say possibility of upsets. I'll say like 11-1 again. I forgot to mention, Boise State has Notre Dame. That's why I could say 11-1. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I don't want to really waste too much of y'all's time. But up next, we got Colorado State. Now, let me be real. Colorado State is not terrible. But 7-5 is where I would expect it to be. Maybe they could win 8 games again. I'm not too sure. But Colorado State is just not at Boise State's level right now. And they have to play both Washington teams as well. So 7-5, 8-4 is right where I put them. So with that being said, I guess I'll put them at above average then. Up next, we got Fresno State. Kansas, Oregon State, and Boise State are going to be the toughest games on here, but I do still think they can go 6-6 again. Perhaps I'm being a little too harsh, but let's be honest, I am a harsh judge, so it's no surprise. I think Fresno State's a long way away from being a conference contender again. And this is also kicking off the Matt Entz era, which is interesting. And next we got the Hawaii Warriors. And for some reason, Timmy Chang is the head coach now. I remember he was a pretty serious quarterback in this one. Well, back in like the 2000s when Hawaii was actually starting to become great with Colt Brennan. People forget that Timmy Chang was actually the guy before Colt Brennan. As far as how I think their season will go, I would say 5-7, 6-6. They are definitely have the talent to be able to get to the bowl game. So they got a freshman quarterback, Micah Alejado. That's going to be kicking off his first season. Well, now his second season now. He played his very first game in the Rainbow Warriors regular season finale. He had 5 touchdowns in that game, by the way. So the future does look bright at quarterback. Unfortunately for Hawaii, they do have Stanford and Arizona in their conference schedule. Did I just say that Sam Houston had 10 wins this season? I'm going to be talking about them when I talk about Conference USA. But anyways, this is going to be tough for Hawaii to get out of the Mountain West. Mountain West is usually tough. Honestly, got the Nevada Wolfpack. I would say just 6-6 and just leave it at that. I'll say like 5-7, but like on the high end of 5-7, should I say. They did lose quite a bit of starters, and they have to open up against Penn State in Happy Valley, which is going to suck. They also got to play Boise State and UNLV. Honestly, the schedule was not friendly to them at all. I would say like below average probably. Yeah, might as well move him down there. It is what it is. I'm trying to get through this quickly as I can. I do apologize because I don't want to waste any of y'all's time with some group of 5 because most of you probably don't care. But I do. Next up, we got San Diego State. I'ma just honestly say they are one of the 2 bottom feeders in this conference. I'll probably say like 3-9, 2-10. They'll probably get worse. But it's not exactly their fault. It's really just because of their schedule. Obviously, they're not quite good enough to really make a bowl game quite yet. I mean, they got Washington State, Cal in non-conference, also Northern Illinois. Then also you got San Jose State, Boise State, and Colorado State, along with Fresno State, who all made a bowl game, which is going to be really tough for the Aztecs to really get through. At the quarterback spot, true freshman Danny O'Neal, he actually went to Wisconsin in the transfer portal, but in return, San Diego State got Michigan transfer Jaden Denegal, which is going to be interesting to see. But oh no, this really isn't exactly San Diego State's fault, it's more of their schedule. And also got the San Jose State Spartans. I'll say they are going to be at least above average, not exactly going to be a contender, but hey, I would say like 8 to 9 wins is possible. What's the coach's name? Ken Matalolo. He actually had some pretty good success in his first year, and he does bring a lot of momentum to 2025. San Jose State actually lucked out with not getting Boise State or UNLV on their schedule. And oh boy. Aside from the defensive backs room being altered, aside of DJ Harvey, Robert Rahimi, and Michael Dansby leaving, and they also have to rebuild their receiving core with Nick Nash and Justin Lockhart leaving as well. However, San Jose State did have some portal success, and the fact that their schedule got them very lucky to avoid Boise State and UNLV, which is pretty insane. And I'm very interested to see what San Jose State can do. Up next, we got UNLV. Obviously, they are going to be the other contender beside Boise State. I'm going to say 9-3. Head coach Dan Mullen is taking over, so he has a lot of SEC experience that he's bringing to the Rebels. The old coach Barry Odom, who led UNLV to an 11-win season, is actually going to Purdue to try to turn that team around. Mullen decided to bring in Virginia quarterback Anthony Colandrea, and they also have a very manageable non-league slate with UCLA, Sam Houston, Miami, and Ohio. UCLA out of the Big Ten, Sam Houston, who was a 10-win team for Conference USA. Like I said, I'll get to Conference USA in like a few days or something like that. And also Miami, Ohio, who, believe it or not, won the MAC championship. They actually did avoid Fresno State and San Jose State. However, they have to play Boise State also. But I can still see this team going 9-3 and 10-2, especially with the great coach who had some great experience. He actually coached 2014 Mississippi State. He actually coached that team for like a couple of years with Dak Prescott as the freaking quarterback. That was a little history lesson for y'all. On next, we got New Mexico. They're obviously the other bottom feeder. No surprise here. They had a bad luck with their schedule as well. Michigan, UCLA out of the Big Ten. You also got Boise State, Air Force, UNLV, and San Jose State. 4 teams expected to make a bowl game this upcoming season. Quarterback Jack Lane is actually transferring over, and Jason Eck is currently the head coach. And this is actually his first season. New Mexico is actually the Mountain West's most difficult job in the world, and everyone can see why. Not basketball, football. Because in basketball, they were actually pretty good for a while. And then we got Utah State. Honestly, they're like below average or bowl game potential. I'll say like 5-7. Who's their new head coach? Bronco Mendenhall. Unfortunately for Utah State, they got Texas A&M and Vanderbilt in the SEC, and they do not play San Diego State, Wyoming, or Colorado State. Yikes. Actually, on second thought, maybe they're just below average because of their tough schedule, and yeah, their roster's not really an ideal spot. The only way Utah State can really be successful this upcoming season is if Bronco Mendenhall somehow completely changes that entire team for the better. But yeah, I didn't even know this, but Utah State also won a Mountain West championship back in like 2021. Thought it'd be a fun fact to know. And finally, we got the Wyoming Cowboys. I expect them to be right around below average as well. Actually, I may change that. Nah, I'm just kidding. They are below average. Challenging schedule, Colorado, Utah in out of conference along with Akron, and that's pretty much it. Actually, no, Akron's like likely win. This thing says 2 likely losses for Colorado, Utah. That's expected. The Mountain West schedule is still challenging despite not having Boise State, so it's going to be extremely difficult for Wyoming to get back to a bowl game. Jay Soffa has a lot to do to turn that Wyoming program around. And that's going to do it for the 2025 season predictions, along with the 2024 season reviews for the Mountain West. Tomorrow I am going to be doing the American Conference, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, that is going to do it for this episode of Grizzly Talks Football. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the red subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. It would also help a lot. This is the Grizzly signing off for now. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace!